it really, though, is shaking to question the left socialism that Australian universities have been pumping out for how many decades now. It really it is a wake-up call to that agenda. And I think that's really at the heart of it too, is are we aligned philosophically with what we're teaching our young people, and have we been? Or are we just doing activism and teaching propaganda on university campuses?
Before we start, we need to tell you up front we are not a licensed financial planning, accounting or law firm. This is simply an education program which will give you factual information. We do not give any general or specific advice around finance, business, investing, options trading, or anything else. That is not what this presentation does. Please see a licensed financial planner when it comes to any investment advice you need.
Today I want to, if we dive into the show, I want to look at the whole fascinating unfolding of what's going on between the United States and Australia at the moment. Trump's hurting the back pocket of our education departments.
I've got no problems with that.
And look, for those who get stirred up seeing a controversial political flag flying right next to the Australian flag at front of our universities, they might welcome this kind of news. It's really fascinating to see what's going on. If you haven't been up to speed as to what has been going on, some people are calling for the Prime Minister to have an emergency meeting. What Trump administration does, cutting funding to 7 Australian universities. They really sent out a bit of a flyer, a questionnaire to these ones. They were basically to the tune of around $386 million, sending it to the Australian Academy of Science in 2024. That's what it was funded. The Australian government provides about $800 million annually in non-medical research through the Australian Research Council. 25% of Australia's publications in biomedical and clinical sciences are involved in these collaborations with the United States. And the Australian researchers basically have been developing vaccines and medical products that underpin Australians' health security, quote unquote, the AAS President Chinupati Jagadish. He's really saying that the uncertainty around research funding had major implications for the value placed on public education. And if they look at it, if they put research in the Australian context, they put it this way: Australians are helping to deliver solutions to pandemics, cure for cancer, innovations in science and engineering, and the critical thinking skills that we need as a society. What they're not also looking at is, of course, the Make America Healthy movement that's been going on, where you've got Robert Kennedy over there really questioning a lot of the way we've been doing health for so many decades, and really overhauling the look of that. The questionnaire itself was fascinating when you look into it and what they were asking, with one of them that didn't make the headlines quite interesting. I'll read some of those questionnaires for you just so you get to a context of what's going on. But in one of them, it was saying things like, we'll read the main one. It says, your organization encourage free speech and encourage open debate and free sharing of information. Now that is really fascinating. I mean, most those who go with the mainstream narrative are going, what are you talking about, right? But those who've had alternative views as to what's been going on in health go, yeah, get that, understand it. And it's really bringing to head, I mean, that kind of question of what is the truth, what is what's become mainstream narrative, as we call it, and really putting that in the spotlight. And Australia's kind of inadvertently getting dragged into that whole debate, whether it likes it or not, kicking and screaming.
We started this fight though. That's what a lot of people are saying. It's like they're going, oh, America's picking on Australia. No, we're not. We're not picking on America. So if you actually have a look, so there was a attempted phone call from Albanese to Donald Trump to get an exemption on these tariffs. But then Trump, I don't know if it was Trump or one of his staffers, turned around and said, why would we give exemptions to a country that is breaching our, I think it's the Second Amendment, like the right to free speech? Sorry, Dad's just told me that's the guns. Is it the First or the Second Amendment that's the right to free speech?
First Amendment.
First Amendment. There you go. So the Australian censorship laws that we passed, the EU Commissioner, whatever her name is, the level of censorship that Australia has placed on around the world and what they can put into Australia is absolutely astronomical. So the tariffs aren't there just for America to make money. It's there to make sure that the companies and the countries that deal with America are adhering to the American way of life. So why would you trade with your worst enemy or someone who's openly against you? And so that's what's happening. And when then you get all these people saying, oh, no, they're removing funding from Australia for no reason. No, it's not. So one of the executive orders that Trump put in is the end of DEI, like very discriminatory policies against normal everyday people. So that is the funding that they've removed from the 7 universities in Australia. That's what you're talking about. So Australia's picked this fight. I think we're idiots for doing it, and this is you reap what you sow. So I'm sorry, but Australia kicked an own goal here. Albanese absolutely put Australia in the worst possible position for America. We could have got those exemptions so easily if we just scrapped all these censorship laws.
And the timing of it's really bad for Albanese as he goes into a federal election. If we look at some of the other questions, and it's really interesting what they're digging for, can you confirm that your organisation does not work with entities associated with communist, socialist, or totalitarian parties, or any party that's started with anti-American beliefs? They ask, can you confirm that your organisation has not received any funding from the PRC, People's Republic of China, including Confucius Institutes, and or partnered with Chinese state or non-state actors, Russia, Cuba, or Iran?
How many Australian politicians now have board of directors jobs within Chinese state-owned companies? Look at our former, I think it was Bob Carr, the former environmental minister, is now working for one of those. He's the highest profile one. From memory, I think it was about $1.2 million a year to be a board of director. He does about maybe 10 hours a month's worth of work. Now tell me that's not a job for mates.
And the thing is, they've been cracking down on dual citizenship in recent years for those in federal parliament who hold federal dual citizen positions. Is this any different? Holding, you're wanting America for defense, and yet you're wanting to do deals with America's countries that it doesn't get along with so well. It's have your cake and eat it type of thing, and it's starting to get to the point where it's becoming a bitter taste in the mouth.
Well, let's take it a step further. I think it was $22 million we gave to Iran for foreign aid. America and Iran are nearly at loggerheads, especially with what happened with Hexef doing those attacks on the Iranian-funded Houthi, like the terrorist organization. So effectively, that's borderline. If the Houthis are confirmed to be receiving funding from Iran, which is confirmed without a doubt, and then they're attacking American warships, isn't that an act of war by Iran? So it's really, and then we're giving Iran $22 million a year. Can you imagine the outcry if Australia gave Russia money?
Yeah, it's well, this is the funny thing, that the NATO is going, well, the European nations are going, why is Trump negotiating with Russia over the conflict in Europe at the moment? He can do what he wants as far as he's concerned, and what are you going to do about it? And I think, look, it's better to seek peace through doing win-win business deals with people rather than take up arms and shoot each other. It costs too much bloodshed. And he demonstrated that in his first term, certainly with how he negotiated with North Korea. And if had he not done that, would have America gone to war with North Korea? It's highly likely it was headed down that path again. I want to highlight too some of the other questions. Can you confirm this is not a climate or environmental justice project or include such elements? Now that strikes really closely to the university campus, those kind of issues. And does this project directly contribute to limiting illegal immigration or strengthening U.S. border security? So you can see America is going, why are we paying all of this information? All these dollars out to this foreign education, and what are we getting in return? And asked that, I actually looked at the Biden's Education Department questionnaire that it had there. Sorry, not the Biden's question, the questionnaire for US research, I beg your pardon. And it goes in there in terms of how long are you going to need this funding for? What is your estimated years? So it's really written from a business perspective. Like, how long do you expect us to keep forking money out for this is what it's essentially asking. And how much can we expect in return on investment with what returned, or if anything? Academia doesn't necessarily think like that, particularly in science circles. It really does depend on their handouts. it's funny that it's registering for 7 different universities across this country at a time that's the worst time for the Prime Minister to be getting these kind of cunning futs.
Yeah, I just find it really fascinating because I know Australia used to be one of the world leaders in cancer research. Like, I have a look at, and we've actually, a lot of people have heard me talk about this. Estelle got burnt when she was very, very young, so they're spraying on skin and all that sort of stuff. So Dr. Fiona Wood was actually our treating doctor for Estelle. She's the one that got the Order of Australia during the Bali bombing. She was absolutely phenomenal. So Australia as a whole on the research side of things, I personally think we are hands down the best in the world. It's really interesting to see how this funding is actually going to affect the universities, considering especially a vast majority of the students are international students and they have to pay all their fees up front. So considering how much money is actually coming into the universities from foreign students, do they actually need all this funding from America? Or are they just pissing it up the wall and just wasting up needless shit?
I think Australian education has been one of our biggest industries in terms of attracting international students, what they charge international students. Obviously, universities are not cheap to run. Not just the academic staff, but the buildings alone are massive. When you look at some of the campuses that are involved here, it really though is shaking to question the left socialism that Australian universities have been pumping out for how many decades now. It really it is a wake-up call to that agenda. And I think that's really at the heart of it too, is are we aligned philosophically with what we're teaching our young people, and have we been? Or are we just doing activism and teaching propaganda on our university campuses? Because I can tell you now, it was bad when I was there in the early 90s, and I can't imagine what it's like now, 30 years later, on those campuses. If it was bad enough then, what would it be like now?
Yep, there was a podcaster, Sydney, I can't remember her last name. She was at the University of Melbourne, and she was doing these, she's a conservative podcaster, some really great shows. She does a lot of like men's rights sort of stuff. Phenomenal. I'll think of her name in a bit, and I'll put a link to her page up. But she did one podcast, and I remember that they were threatening students that if they spoke out against the university or spoke out against any of the LGBTQ stuff like that, they were actually preventing them from graduating. Even though they passed all the academic side of things, they were not allowed to pass. Now, I've recently gone to Luan, wanted to go back to school for a few things, and we went through, it was accounting course and bookkeeping course. And so the very, very first course we had to do was Aboriginal studies. Like, that was built into the course. She had to do it. So I'm like, what has Aboriginal history got to do with accounting and bookkeeping? Like, it's just got absolutely nothing to do with it. So what I'm really, really hopeful this is what's going to happen. There's a lot of DEI programs, gender equality, like gender study courses, stuff like that. So you're paying for the lecturer, you're paying for the room. There's a whole heap of stuff you're paying for it. I'm hoping against hope that the universities go, all right, let's scrap all these DEI programs, or like the gender studies and all that crap that doesn't give you a job, just gives you a massive debt. They scrap all that stuff and they get back to the STEM subjects: science, technology, English, and mathematics. Do the things that are actually usable in everyday life. We need to get back to the basics in education. Start being Australia was one of the smartest countries in the world. I'm talking 30 years ago. We need to get back to that. We need to start educating our young people to be able to think critically. We need to stop telling them how to think. They need to be able to think for themselves. And I think that's lost in Australia.
Well, it's interesting that it comes at a time with the whole tariff debate that's been going on. We talked about this last week on the Greater Wealth in relation to the Prime Minister's response to what's going on with the tariffs on steel and aluminium. And I said it was a weak response. It's not a response that Trump will respect. It's like, we need a fair go. Americans do not think like that. And that's what you've got to understand as well is the handout socialistic type mindset, tall poppy syndrome combination that we have here in Australia just doesn't work on the international stage. And it's time for Australia to psychologically grow up, I personally believe. We're not the adolescent that we were 40 years ago. We are on a whole different stage. And yeah, we do the youthful things like, yeah, we're dominant in sports and all that sort of stuff. And we show the world how good we are at sports. But we need to grow up in other areas now and go, you know what, stop showing off and actually produce stuff. We've lost an entire car industry in this country. We have to
I'm
be
so
far more
glad you said that. Well,
we
about
have
the farming side of thing. So, sorry to cut you off there, but because I'm in Leighton at the moment, I've been talking to my dad here. He's been showing me around, showing some of the family farms and stuff like that. There's one of the farms here, I think it was 800 acres of land, beautiful grapevines, fruit trees, all this sort of stuff. It was actually producing something tangible that you can sell, that grows the GDP. It creates jobs. It's the amount of heat that would have been sucking out of the environment, stuff like that. It was just an amazing farm. And I've just found out that they've scrapped, literally, I've gone past it. I want to go take some photos of it. And they've leveled the entire farm, everything on it, all the buildings, fences, absolutely everything's gone off this farm. And they're putting in a bloody solar panel farm. And I'm just like, why the hell would you do something like that? I just don't get it. I just truly do not get it. So
here in Australia just doesn't work on the international stage. And it's time for Australia to psychologically grow up, I personally believe. We're not the adolescent that we were 40 years ago. We are on a whole different stage. And yeah, we do the youthful things like, yeah, we're dominant in sports and all that sort of stuff. And we show the world how good we are at sports. But we need to grow up in other areas now and go, you know what, stop showing off and actually produce stuff. We've lost an entire car industry in this country. We have to
I'm so glad you said that. Well, about the farming side of thing. So, sorry to cut you off there, but because I'm in Leighton at the moment, I've been talking to my dad here. He's been showing me around, showing some of the family farms and stuff like that. There's one of the farms here, I think it was 800 acres of land, beautiful grapevines, fruit trees, all this sort of stuff. It was actually producing something tangible that you can sell, that grows the GDP. It creates jobs. It's the amount of heat that would have been sucking out of the environment, stuff like that. It was just an amazing farm. And I've just found out that they've scrapped, literally, I've gone past it. I want to go take some photos of it. And they've leveled the entire farm, everything on it, all the buildings, fences, absolutely everything's gone off this farm. And they're putting in a bloody solar panel farm. And I'm just like, why the hell would you do something like that? I just don't get it. I just truly do not get it. So anyway, we've got Taz here. Love the name. Thanks, Taz. So New South Wales Man Cave. I can't take credit for it. So Dad, take credit for it. So yeah.
See you all.
He's gate crashing today. So he's got some awesome memorabilia. Dire Straits there. Rolling Stones here. I don't know what that top one is there. There's some really cute bums here. And some other stuff here as well, the Rolling Stones. Sorry, that's called Chisel. So I thought Aaron would like this one, so I intentionally made sure I was in the man cave for this one, but Aaron's a little bit sick there. And Taz is saying hi, Dad. So Taz is our token lefty. So she's not left, she's just cool. She's got some strange ideas, but, you know, each to their own. So anyway, Derek, you told me I had to put some videos in.
I did. I'd like to get to that in just a sec because I want to shift gears for a moment and really look at what the situation and why this is occurring. So you might be wondering, well, what's going on in America? America's education of its students in its kindy through to year 12 has been absolutely shocking for a long time, and America knows it. Let me put it into perspective for you. What they've looked at, the Department of Education under the Biden administration spent over $100 million on grants to universities to train kindy to 12 social workers in critical race theory, social justice and diversity, equity and inclusion, the whole DEI that Travis has been alluding to. That was released on a report on Wednesday. And the grants were issued on the guise of providing mental health to students through the Mental Health Service Professional Demonstration Grant Program and the School-Based Mental Health Service Grant Program, according to that report, by parents who call themselves Parents Defending Education. And the funds were distributed to 26 universities that institute required courses teaching about oppression, white supremacy, radicalizing social workers who go on to work in kindy through to year 12s. This is what they're dealing with. This is why the American departments are going, what are we spending our money? What are we getting out of it? Why are we doing this? And that also, if you look at it, it's been going on since 1979. The US Department of Education allocated over $3 trillion since 1979. So this is, well over 50 years. Over this period, well, almost 50 years, I should say, more 40 years. Over this period, student spending has risen more than 245%. and yet they're not getting the results. Let's look at these results, okay? Math and reading scores for 13-year-olds fell to the lowest point in decades. 60%, this is the US, right? 60% of fourth graders and almost 75% of eighth graders lack proficiency in math. 70% of fourth and eighth graders are not proficient in reading, and 40% of fourth grade students fail to meet even basic reading standards. You've got standardized test scores remain stagnant for years, and US students are ranked 28th out of 37 OECD nations in math. So you're looking at those stats and they're looking at, hey, we've got to change. We've got to make America educated again, so to speak, if you would. Have a look at this video that Travis has got, and you'll start to see some of the situations, why they're changing and doing what they're doing.
Executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all. And it sounds strange, doesn't it? Department of Education, we're going to eliminate it. And everybody knows it's right. And the Democrats know it's right. And I hope they're going to be voting for it, because ultimately it may come before them. But everybody knows it's right. And we have to get our children educated. We're not doing well with the world of education in this country. And we haven't for a long time.
So what you've got here is Trump announcing that he's getting rid of the Department of Education. This is probably every kid's dream come true when you think about it. But what he's doing is he's taking it from a federal level and pushing it back to the states and saying, you're going to be responsible, the 50 states of the United States. You are now going to head over and look through that, because it's not working. The system is not working as it is. If we look at the next video here, he's actually signing it in to a power. You got that other video there, Travis?
Is that the executive order one?
Yeah, let's see that one. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Just quickly, before I jump into that one, you had the press secretary is number 2. But when you have a look at that money, you were saying it was nearly $3 trillion that the Department of Education had wasted over the last 40 years or whatever. The national debt for America, isn't that like $36 trillion? So that's like 10%. Yeah, that's nearly 10% of the national debt. So that's an insane amount of waste. So, okay, are we going to the executive order now?
Let's go to the second one then. Let's go to the second one, and this is in the lead up to it, and what he was about to do there. Have a look at this.
Where was their criticism of our nation's failing test scores for the last several decades? The Department of Education was founded in the 1970s, and since then we have spent more than $3 trillion at this federal bureaucracy. What has been the return on that investment for the American taxpayer? Levels that are less than ideal, less than proficient. Our children's test scores are incredibly concerning when it comes to reading rates, literacy rates, math, and science test scores. The numbers prove that, and this president is finally taking much needed action to return education to where it belongs, and that's to educators closest to students in their classrooms in their respective states. We're going to have a great event here later at 4 o'clock. There will be students here, teachers here, parents here, educators, and of course governors from around the country who are very excited about taking on this responsibility to educate our nation's students.
Who's going to run federal student loans?
So the Department of Education will be much smaller than it is today. As you know, the President's executive order directed Linda McMahon to greatly minimize the agency. So when it comes to student loans and Pell Grants, those will still be run out of the Department of Education, but we don't need to be spending more than $3 trillion over the course of a few decades on a department that's clearly failing in its initial intention to educate our students.
So is the federal government going to be
it's going to
spending
be
less?
much smaller than it is. Is it not going to be shut down completely? And then I have a second question.
As I said, Pell Grants and student loans will still be run out of the department in Washington, D.C., but the great responsibility of educating our nation's students will return to the states.
And the Department of Education plays a critical role in enforcing civil rights laws that prohibit discrimination. Who's going to do that now?
Any critical functions of the department, such as that, will remain. But again, we're greatly reducing the scale and the size of this department.
You can see the business mindset here is so important. We spent over $3 trillion. This was her opening line here. She's the press secretary, of course, for Donald Trump, or for the Republican administration. We have spent over $3 trillion, and what do we got to show for it? It's clearly not working. So you think the United States is too worried about pulling how many hundreds of millions from the Australian universities of research? No, they're prepared to cut the entire department on a federal level and push it back to the states. That's how radical they are in the way that they want to do this.
Okay, so we've got a comment here from Taz. So the way mainstream media make it sound, it was him completely wiping out the Department of Education so that those with special needs will no longer have any assistance. They never implied it would be thrown to the state's responsibility. Education should have always been the state's responsibility, especially same as here in Australia. So not only do we have the Department of Education on the state level, we've also got the Department of Education on the federal level as well. You've got this double dipping going on, which again, just you don't need it to be double dipped like that one. So, so Michelle Howard, this is actually my stepmom, Dad's partner. So same happening in Australia, and she's also said, what does Australia spend on education? I can find that one out for you. I'll pop it up in the comments later. But it's from memory, I think it's like 36 million, might be $1 billion or something. Let me do a quick Google search and I'll find it for you. But it is an insane amount of money. So let's see.
It is, and I think that's what we've got to ask is what are we getting for it? Now, Australia's cleverly set itself up as far as education is concerned, or at least tertiary education is concerned, by making it one of our best exports in terms of the students we get, particularly from the Asian Pacific regions, who come here, where it's actually prestigious for them in their cultures, local cultures, to have studied abroad and overseas, and they pay for it. They really do pay for it. In this situation, America's going, what are we getting out of this? And questioning that, you look at the intent of the questionnaire. Is there freedom of speech going on? Thanks for looking at that, Travis. $126 billion for 24-25 budget, 2024-2025 budget. $126 billion is
now that's not taking into account the school fees that people pay for. That's not taking into account the international students' money that is coming in and any grants that they might be receiving from international countries as well. So like America. So it is an insane amount of money, and I'll be honest with you, our school scores aren't much better than America. Like, we are better than America, but not by much. One thing I'm noticing in Australia, I'm finding more and more parents that are actually homeschooling their parents, or like us, who refuse to teach certain aspects of the curriculum. So we've actually had our right to homeschool removed from us from the government. So our girls still go to the schools, but if you ask them, why do you go to the school? And their answer is to socialise. That's what they're there at schools for. If they learn something great, fantastic, but they're there to socialise, I will teach them what they need. And Celeste she was at a school in Perth. She got the top of the class. Estelle was the top of the class. We went to a different school down near Mandurah while we were staying at Mum's place before we come over to New South Wales. She topped the schools there as well. So it's one of those things, the schooling is so bad in Australia that more and more parents are pulling them out of school. And that's the other thing I'm finding in America from talking to my people I'm going to meet up over there. More and more people don't have any faith whatsoever in the education department, so they're pulling all the kids out.
In relation to that, as a parent, you're seeing, a lot of time spent at school for what? There is a lot of extracurricular activities that you go, even in private schools, whether, they're spending it at a library, they're spending it in assemblies, they're spending it doing these Harmony Day type things and dress ups and all this sort of stuff. And parents are busy as it is. And they're kind of going, listen, we don't have time for this. And I think what was a bit of a wake up call for a lot of parents is when the shutdowns, the lockdowns happened during the last 4 years, and you've got your kids now trying to, learn online. For me, it was a bit of an insight. What is my kid actually learning? We were sending them to private school. I'm going, what am I actually paying for? They're basically put on these Chromebooks and they're babysitting them for the rest of the day. And I'm going, hang on a second. Aren't you ever using a blackboard or whiteboard, as they call them now? Aren't you actually getting out there and teaching? And it's a lot needs to come under question. Or is it just the computers that are expected to program the kid to come out with a qualification at the end?
So this is a cool question. My wife Luan is actually at my grandmother's house. I haven't seen her since she was 7, since I was 7. So Nana Betty is watching. She said, "Where did the money go?" And children do not benefit from it. So Nana Betty, happy 94th birthday. So she's going strong. Thanks for joining in the stream, Nan. By the way, so a lot of the money I'm finding, it's kind of weird because the school the girls was going to in Mandurah, there was no Aboriginal children in the school whatsoever. So the sirens, so you press a button, it screams at you to tell you to go to the classroom. That was actually a didgeridoo sound. There was all these Aboriginal paintings all over the buildings. There was a welcome to nation thing, welcome to country as you walk through the school. Every assembly, they started with a welcome to country. And the school was saying, "Oh no, we don't do any politics in the school." And then I watched there when Celeste was getting one of her certificates, and there's the principal, all proud and everything, this white guy with an Aboriginal painted shirt with a sign that says, like, writing across the front, "Always was and always will be." Now, my question is, if the school doesn't support any politics, they want to keep the politics out of school, why is the principal wearing a political motivated shirt? So that's the sort of bullshit that's going on in the education system in Australia. Sorry, Nana, for swearing in front of you, but it's just... it infuriates me, and I think a lot more parents need to take accountability for their own children. We pulled the kids out. We took an active role in their education, and the amount of compliments we receive about how intelligent the girls are, how well-mannered they are, all that side of things, I just want to rip my hair out when I see some of these other monsters that are running around there. And so having parental involvement in the kids' upbringing makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. We've seen huge differences in our children since we put them into homeschooling as well. And, we have got the luxury to do that in terms of, we're not in a financial situation where both our parents, myself and my wife, are required to work. I run a business from home, and that's given us the flexibility to do that. I wanted to see my kids grow up. I didn't want to see that. So when you return to family values, I'm seeing them get a far better education than they would have otherwise.
So it seems like education is a really touchy subject. We're getting a heap of questions coming through. So why that much, and are there still a number of kids not attending school? So when we were in Geraldton, I was renovating the 2 houses up there. I was out the house 2 o'clock in the morning. We're hearing a big massive ruckus, and there's like a whole heap of kids between the age of 4 and probably about 13, 14, just walking the streets at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, just throwing rocks at houses, just being right old little shitheads. And it's like, okay, so going back to my comment, like, parents need to be involved in the school kids, in their schooling. Where the hell were the parents during that time period? So there's only so much teachers can do because of the policies. They're stuck. Like, I remember way back when I was at school, when I was like in the 1980s, if I played up, I was shit scared of getting caught by a teacher. Now it doesn't matter. Like, teachers they can't do anything. They can't discipline the kids. When they call the parents in to do disciplining, it's like, well, why aren't you doing something about it? They're blaming the teacher when they can't do anything. So I think parents really need to start taking the initiative and taking part in the kid's life. And God, I looked like an Italian there. But it really infuriates me. I think a lot of the blame's putting on the teachers, and I don't think the teachers should be blamed on this one. I think it's more of an administration thing, and the legislation that has passed has massively failed our kids. So
when you start legislating against, we'll get back to Trump in a minute and what he's doing, but when you start legislating a breakdown of a family situation, you're going to have social issues that come with that. So, this has been a thing that has broken down over decades, where, it was hard. It was unusual once upon a time for divorces to occur in society. It was unusual for people to shack up together before they got married. It was unusual before for the family courts to be infiltrated with divorce settlements and all that sort of stuff once upon a time, and then child support payments and all that sort of stuff. It was unusual for both parents to work once upon a time. Back in that era, 50 years ago, you didn't have the social problems you have today, where you have children waking up, being carted off at 6 o'clock in the morning to the before and after school care program, then being carted by care workers to the schools, being educated, then brought home, collected by those after-school care workers, and there till 6:30 in the evening, which is barely a family life for that child. And the educators who are looking after your child do not have the power of a parent to discipline the child. So the child is getting away with a lot because of the system, and it's failing. And we will pay a huge price for that.
Yeah.
Let me just say this. We will pay a huge price for that as a society. We are not counting the cost of what the breakdown of the family is actually costing us as a nation. Because, give you a practical example, when a couple split, suddenly he has to move out of the house. Usually it's generally the bloke who moves out of the house. Suddenly he's got to take on another rental to do so, right? At the moment, we have a shortage of houses in our community because of the immigration issue, 1.5 million that have come in the last 2 years. Can you start seeing the problems then? Now he has to pay child support payments as well, and there's a middleman. The government will take it out of his account. He can't give it directly. It's just a system that if we encourage people and families to grow and work together, we'd have kids would be better off, families and marriages would be better off. The system's not working.
A couple of questions here from Michelle. First of all, the $126 billion also includes private schools. Private schools do get state and federal funding for some of their courses that they do. Some of the wages, especially with the scholarships, also gets government funding as well. So I heard anywhere between 30% of the funding from private schools is actually from tuition, so 70% up to like 60% is done by government. So there is a lot of funding for the private schools. The other one is, do you think that both parents working impacts the kid's life? Absolutely. Having both parents at home is always the best option, having both parents involved. But I was having a look at it, and even sitting down with the kids, 20 minutes just listening to a kid read, correct some of their grammar here and there, just teaching some of the basic maths as they're really, really young, like Estelle's age, like 6 to about 10 years of age. That 20 minutes a day sitting there one-on-one with a kid is probably equivalent to a full day out school. Because you got to remember, out school, it's one teacher, 32 students. There's no one-on-one time. You might get a little bit here, a little bit there, but there's not enough. So just even if it's 10, 20, 15 minutes as well, it makes a world of difference towards the kid's education. So yeah.
In addition to that, Travis, I've heard adults talk about the impact it's had on their lives, coming home and there's no parent there at home. And they've had to basically, if they're the older child, be the parent to their younger siblings. There's no mum and dad till much later. And I remember hearing a story recently where, there was a fire that happened at the house while these kids were at home. And this woman is saying, that I had then to put the fire out, and mum and dad weren't there for us. And they were like, whoa, hold on a second. This counsellor or whatever is saying, you understand that is not normal. What you've gone through is a bit of an abandonment in terms of your childhood, that you had to face a fire and there was no parental supervision there. And I think we don't recognise just that aspect of it alone. Yes, there is a better improving education. And the problem is too, when are we allowing kids just to be kids? The other issue too is that we're having a curriculum thing where they are trying to fill up more work to fill up those hours between 8:30 to 3 p.m., right? With activity. Even if the kids have done the basic information for that day, well, we've got another half hour we've got to fill here, so we'll give them this activity, we'll give them that activity. And I don't know that that's always helpful for the child. And you see it's leaking into the childcare centres too, where they're doing the before and after school care, and they're forcing them to be more education focused. I'm going, the kid's been in school for 6.5 hours for the day. If the teacher hasn't done their job, when is the kid just going to have downtime to play and be a kid, right? And it's just such a throw it down their throat thing. These are kind of the problems. That's not normal. That is not normal in child development.
Yep. So just going on what you just said then about, and hey Josh, welcome to the stream, about the, Jordan Peterson did a really good one about kids, especially boy, like between this age, say 8 to 13, male children, if you will, with the PP and anything. He was saying that boys don't have ADHD. A lot of the kids that are getting diagnosed with ADHD don't actually have it. What it is, they're just kids. They've got all this energy. They want to play. They want to explore. They want to expand their horizon, but they're being told, right, shut up, sit down, read a book. And just the way boys' minds are wired compared to girl minds, they're just two totally different things. You need to get them out there. You need to get them dirty, have them fall out of trees, run them absolutely ragged so they don't have the energy to be disruptive. then try to teach them afterwards. So they're taking a lot of that because they're sugarcoating kids, they're putting them in cotton candy, they're not allowing them to, go hurt themselves, scrape their knees, ride the skateboard, do jumps on your bikes, do that, release all that pent-up energy, and then they can start educating themselves properly that way. The other thing I've found, especially with the way the education system is going, simple things like manners. Kids aren't learning the same manners these days. And to me, I always tell the kids that manners are the lubricant of society. If you want something and you're not really supposed to have it, if you apply and you try to be creative and helpful with the person you need help with, they're more likely to help you. If you just go up to someone and say, right, I want a coffee, they're not going to have it. They're going, no, go get stuffed. But it's like, hey, so-and-so, great being here. Thanks for having me. Hey, do you mind if I get a coffee? Can I please have a coffee? It's so much more likely that you don't get the outcome that you desire. So I think that's another thing that's really lacking in society. Anyway, we're running out of time. I know you've got 2 more videos you want to run through. There's so many questions coming through. Taz, Michelle, Josh is coming in here as well, Nana Betty as well. All of you guys, thanks for coming in. If you do have questions, pop them in. We'll try to get back to them later.
Let's do Taz's real quick, the top 2
the
there.
Big one?
They love my job. So, let's get through Taz. America's so bad with lack of education. A guy went around asking US random people to name a country in North America. No one person could do it. Most of them thought North America was the USA. Another one, he asked US peeps where New England was. All of them thought New England was in England. Those are all super concerning that US people are so behind they don't even know geography or what regions exist in their own country. You can see the whole point of the Republican administration saying that we've got to do better at this. Absolutely right, Tash.
Sorry, I've got to jump in this one. Girl maths. How the hell can anyone think that girl maths is a real thing? If I've purchased something and I've paid cash, it's free. No, it's not. You're an idiot. So it's things like this. We need to start calling idiocy what it is. Like if you're a muppet and believe you, I paid cash for this, so it's free. If I return something, you mean I've just earned that $35 that it cost me? No, it cost you $35 in the first place. You've just returned it. You've lost your time, but you haven't made any money back. You've just got your original deposit back. That is why I think a lot of the financial institutions are going to shit, is because they're supporting stupid ideas of girl maths and boy maths, dog maths, and all the other crap that goes with it.
Well, it's all that gender ideology as well. When we really send our kids off to learn maths, reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And they're having to learn all this other crazy stuff that goes against a lot of parents' values. And how dare they rise up and say this is nonsense, and ostracized for that. Well, what happened to freedom of speech? Taz,
sorry, just another comment that Taz put in. So for Taz, I love my job so much, but I also dislike that I do have to leave the house at 7:30 a.m. and put the responsibility on my teens to drop my youngest off at school and pick him up.
And that's the whole issue, is often people are doing this for economic reasons, and I get it. I know that not everybody can homeschool. I get it. I understand it. But you've got to ask, I think there's 2 parts to it, right? There's the whole thing of we have land control in this country, and this is why Australians love their homes. They want to own their own homes, but it's manipulated. It's so price controlled in this country. We have the lowest population. We have about 2 people per square kilometre, and yet we won't release land to build more homes because that would also lower the price of current homes. There's that issue of it, and the sector of it. I think the other thing is too is values. I mean, I'm not putting myself on a pedestal here, but I think at some point you've got to. Values are also determine what you do, where you spend your time, and what you spend your money on. And, my wife and I, when we first married, decided we're not going to put our kids in childcare. That was just a decision we made at that time. And, we had family who owned childcare centres and all that sort of stuff. At one point, my wife put a child in for 1 or 2 days sessions. And I can tell you now, I'm glad we didn't do that permanently or do that a long time. That was not a feature. But I think you have to make these decisions at some point. What are my values? What's important to me? And what I'm going to do here, and protecting our kids, not just from, and I'm not having a go at any childcare centres or anything like this, but I'm the one who should be instilling values into my kids, not someone else who I have never met before. I think that's a personal decision that you've got to make when you're going through that. Let's have a look at this, if we may. If we can have a look at this next footage here. This is the actual thing being signed, executive order
Yeah.
by Trump, getting away again of the federal education department in the United States. Take a look.
Yeah.
So there it is. It goes into signing. But what's really, really fascinating is another video that's come out. Link the dots here. Now, got to look into this closer and really see if there's something in it. But take a look at what this, I don't know what you call them, social media follower, YouTuber, whatever you call them, has something with a TikToker, social influencer is looking for. Look at what their claims are. And I think a lot of this, in this age of revelation, of things coming to light and hand, it's going to be really interesting. Again, I say, follow the money trail. Take a look at this.
So Trump signed an executive order today to begin dismantling the Department of Education. Awesome. Getting sent back to the states like it should. Although that's not going to solve the problem of our kids getting shit education. What we need to do is look at the curriculum they're getting and where that's coming from. For instance, many of the science textbooks in schools come from the Discovery Channel, actually, owned by Warner Brothers. Lovely. And a good portion of the books also come from a company called McGraw Hill. Now, I was checking into them and actually found some weird things. Check this out. They formed a partnership with Robert Maxwell in 1989, creating the second largest textbook publisher in the United States. Yes, Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's dad. But wait, there's more. In 2012, McGraw Hill sold their education division to a company called Apollo Global Management. And one of the founders of that company is Leon Black, who used to be one of Jeffrey Epstein's good buddies. Now tell me, why do we have all these Epstein connections with companies that make our kids' textbooks? Oh no, man, I found that shit was weird, I had to tell you. Unraveling our messed up education system is gonna take a lot of work, and getting rid of the DOE is just the start. Just saying though, homeschooling looks like a better option every day that goes by.
Wow. Okay. I might need to follow that guy.
So the plot thickens. Where is your education coming from? What values are behind it? Who's pushing it and why? So if you start lifting the lid on this, it's getting very, very interesting. And you can see why the Trump administration is asking the universities of Australia these tough questions and questionnaires of what are we funding? What's behind it? Is it in any way affecting other policies? How long will it turn profitable? What's going on, guys? It's fascinating, this whole thing. And I think it's something that we as parents are going to wake up and go, who's behind our education? What's being taught to our kids? Does it come in alignment to what our values are? Because it influences your kids. You know, their personalities are formed at a very young age, 4 or 5 years. A lot of it is ingrained already through your example. But then is it being followed up by the curriculums that are being taught in the classrooms?
And the other thing you've also got to remember, your kids are the future of the country that you're in. So they're the ones that are going to be generating the income, they're going to be producing the stuff for the GDP of the country as a whole. If you start manipulating the kids now, give it a generation or so, you can totally change the belief system of an entire country. So I genuinely understand why the Trump administration, and I think Australia should be holding the government to a very, very high level of standard and saying, no, you need to do what's right by our kids. And just seeing that, knowing that, wow, the connection to the Maxwells and Epstein's Island, I had no idea about that one. So thank you very much for that, Derek. You've just effectively vindicated my decision to tell the education department to go stick it in the pipe. So on that one,
that's the American, Travis, that's the American education system. We got to look at who are the publishers.
Australia imports everything from America. To say that that's not affecting the Australian education system, you're a bit of a fool if you think otherwise. What do you think?
I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just clarifying. I'm not going to put it all in the one basket. You got to do your research there.
Yeah.
It's always great to talk about this stuff. So in terms of education, we need to, as they say, as the Trump administration is asking, what are we getting for our money that we're spending here in Australia? What are we getting for our money spending it in our own house, in terms of trillions of dollars for the own Department of Education? I think we as parents need to take up a pair and saying, what are our kids getting as far as an education is concerned? If you can homeschool, power to you. I know it's not possible for everyone, but it certainly will change the quality of education your child can receive potentially. It's fantastic. And not only that, but it saves the country a lot of money because it costs to send your kid to school. That's a lot of money to send them to school and for the taxpayer.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Derek. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.